The dawn came gray and silent over the outlaw camp. Wind tugged at torn canvas, rattling coffee tins, whispering across the trampled dirt. Smoke rose thin from a dying fire. The girl crouched near a wagon wheel, her wrists chained, her ankles rubbed raw beneath the iron. She was maybe 20, barefoot, hollow-eyed, but proud. Her name was Clara Hale, though no one here cared to use it. They called her the trader's prize. Brant Doolin swaggered out from his tent, a shadow of a man built from whiskey and violence. 40, broad shoulders, black beard streaked with gray. He stretched, spat into the dust, and looked her over like he was inspecting a mule. "You're a tough one," he said. "Didn't break yet." Clara lifted her chin. The wind caught her tangled brown hair and blew it across her face. "I'd rather die than be yours," she said. The camp went still for a heartbeat. Then came Doolin's laugh, thick, mean, echoing. "Die," he said, pulling his knife and tapping the blade under her chin. "Sweetheart, death's mercy. Ain't no mercy left out here." The outlaws around the fire chuckled low, some pretending not to look. The air stank of horse sweat, unwashed bodies, and gun oil. Doolin leaned close enough for her to smell the whiskey on his breath. "You'll fetch a fine trade when we hit Dawson's Crossing," he murmured. "If you don't, I'll find another use for you myself." Clara didn't flinch, though her pulse hammered so loud she could hear in her ears. She wanted to scream, but she knew screams fed men like Doolin, so she kept quiet, watching a line of light creeping across the horizon, praying for one more dawn, because dawn meant another chance. A horse neighed from the ridge. The men turned. One of the lookouts shouted, "Rider coming in." Doolin frowned. Who the hell's riding this early? A figure appeared through the dust, tall in the saddle, coat flapping, hat pulled low. He rode a black mare foaming with sweat, the kind of horse you don't waste unless you've been running far. He reined in slow, boots hitting dirt with a soft thud. The stranger looked around the camp with eyes sharp and quiet. He couldn't have been more than 35. Sun-browned skin, a revolver tied low on his hip, calm in a way that made dangerous men nervous. "Mornin'," he said. "Didn't mean to interrupt breakfast." Doolin stepped forward. "You lost, cowboy?" "Maybe," the man said, voice even. "Name's Ethan Cole. I'm heading west. Saw your fire. Thought you might have coffee." Doolin smirked. "We got coffee. Ain't free." "Didn't figure it was," Ethan said. His eyes flicked once toward Clara, caught the glint of her chain, and moved on as if he hadn't seen it. "You folks running cattle or trouble?" "Little of both," Doolin said. "Depends who's a skin." Ethan gave a faint smile. "Just a man passing through." The tension thickened like gunpowder smoke. A few of Doolin's men circled, restless hands near their belts. Clara sat still, trying to read the stranger's face. Something in his stance, loose but ready, made her heart hitch. Doolin poured a tin cup of coffee and offered it with a smirk. "So, Cole, you come from the fort?" "From the hills," Ethan said. He sipped, eyes steady. "Heard there's trade down Dawson way." "Trade, yeah," Doolin said, grinning toward Clara. "Got myself a fine piece of the market." The words made her stomach twist. Ethan's gaze shifted, just a fraction. Doolin saw it. "You got an eye for property, Cole? She's fetching a fair price." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Don't deal in flesh," he said. "Then you're passing through," Doolin growled. "Ain't got nothing else for you." The camp's laughter died when Ethan didn't move. His right hand hung loose beside his gun, the way a man's hand does when it's used to draw fast. Doolin squinted. "You got something to say, stranger?" Ethan looked at Clara again. Dirt streaked her face. The iron cuff had rubbed her skin raw and bleeding. He said softly, "Ain't no woman property. Not in my world." Doolin's grin vanished. "Your world's about to get a lot smaller, friend." A rifle clicked somewhere behind Ethan. He didn't turn. "Careful," he said. "Men get killed talking, stupid, before breakfast." For a second, no one breathed. Then Doolin spat. "You got big words for a man standing alone." Ethan's tone dropped low. "Ain't alone. Got right and a bullet on my side. Either'll do." Clara saw Doolin's hand twitch toward his holster. She whispered, "Don't," barely audible, but it was too late. The air cracked. 2 shots, sharp close. Dust jumped under Doolin's boots. His gun hand froze mid-draw. Then his knees gave. He fell face first into the dirt, coffee spilling beside him. For a heartbeat, silence. Then chaos. Men shouted, scrambling for rifles. Horses screamed, breaking their ties. Ethan moved like lightning, ducking low, firing twice, then again. Each shot dropped another outlaw. Clara ducked behind the wagon, heart pounding. Bullets thudded into it inches from her. "Go!" Ethan barked. "I can't," she gasped, holding up her wrists. "Chains." He was beside her in 2 strides. The knife flashed cold clean. 1 strike, then another, and the iron split. The chain fell into the dust with a clatter like thunder. "Can you ride?" he asked. Her voice shook. "I'll try." He pulled her toward a horse. Doolin's bay, still trembling from the gunfire. More men were running from the ridge, shouting. Ethan swung into the saddle, then hauled her up behind him. "Hold tight," he said. She did. He kicked the mare hard, and they burst through the camp, dirt spraying, bullets whining past their heads. Clara clung to him, her hands slick with sweat, breath hot against his back. The wind tore through her hair as they thundered into the open plain. Behind them, the outlaw camp shrank into dust and smoke. They rode hard across the flat land, the sun climbing pale over the horizon. Clara's arms ached from clinging to the saddle. Her bare feet scraped against the stirrups, but she didn't dare speak. She could still hear Doolin's voice in her head, the sound of chains hitting dirt. Ethan slowed only when the land dipped into dry ravines. He glanced back once, scanning the far ridge. "We bought maybe an hour," he said. "You hurt?" "Not bad," she said. Her voice trembled, then steadied. "You killed him." "Had to," he said simply. "You'd be dead if I didn't." She swallowed. "You didn't even know me." He gave her a brief look over his shoulder. "Didn't have to." The wind picked up again, carrying the smell of dust and sage. Clara pressed her forehead against his back, her thoughts a blur. Every hoofbeat felt like freedom, like breath returning after months underwater. Yet fear clung to her ribs. What if they caught them? As the light brightened, she dared to ask, "Where are we going?" "North. There's a river. Crossing it will shake him for a while." "You've done this before," she said. Ethan's mouth twitched. "Too many times." He said no more, and she didn't press. The silence between them was heavy but alive, like the pause before a storm. By the time they stopped to rest, the sun had burned high. They sheltered beneath a rocky overhang, the mare snorting and stamping. Clara climbed down stiffly, her legs weak. Ethan knelt, checking the saddle cinch. His shirt was streaked with blood and dust, but his movement stayed calm. She watched him in silence, unsure what to say. Finally, she asked, "Why risk your life for me?" He looked up, eyes narrow under the brim of his hat. "Ain't the first time I've seen a person in chains. Last time, I didn't do nothing. Didn't sleep right since." The words hit her harder than she expected. She wanted to thank him, but something stopped her, the fear of feeling anything again. He handed her a canteen. "Drink slow. Haven't had water in a while, I reckon." She drank, the water metallic and warm, but precious. "You're a bounty hunter, aren't you?" "Was," he said. "Quit when I realized I was just another kind of outlaw." She nodded slowly. "Guess we both lost something." He gave a short laugh. "Out here, everyone's losing something." For the first time, she smiled. It was small, but real. The kind of smile that could almost fool the world into thinking she wasn't broken. They sat in silence until the sun dipped. Then Ethan rose, scanning the horizon again. "We can't stay. They'll come fast when they find the bodies." She stood, trembling but determined. "Then we ride." He helped her into the saddle and swung up behind her this time, reins in hand. The air cooled as the day faded, painting the world in gray-blue. When they finally crested a ridge, the last light spilled across the plain. Clara looked back once. The outlaw camp was gone, just smoke on the wind. She whispered, "You really think we'll make it?" Ethan's voice was quiet. "We just did." She didn't know why, but she believed him. The horizon opened before them, vast, empty, endless. Freedom looked rough, uncertain, and dangerous, but it was theirs. For the first time in months, Clara Hale could breathe without fear. As they rode into the rising dawn, the last of her chains gleamed faintly in the dust behind them, catching the light before vanishing into the prairie. And though neither spoke aloud, both knew the same truth. This was only the beginning. The prairie stretched endless under a dull, white sky. Dust swirled in the hoof prints of two horses, one carrying a man bleeding through his sleeve, the other a girl still learning how to breathe free air. The wind howled across the flats, tugging at their clothes, stinging their eyes. Clara Hale, 20, rode behind Ethan Cole, 35, her arms wrapped around his waist, her cheek pressed to his back. She could feel the steady rise and fall of his breath. Strong, sure, unbroken. They hadn't spoken in hours. Only the creak of leather, the soft jingle of tack, and the far cry of a hawk followed them. Ethan's horse stumbled once on a patch of shale, and he pulled up, grimacing. Blood from the graze in his arm had soaked through the sleeve, dark and sticky. "You're hurt worse than you said," Clara murmured. He shook his head. "I've bled more for less." He scanned the horizon. No movement but the shimmering air. "We keep riding till we hit the wash. Can't risk the open too long." "Are they following us?" she asked. "They will," he said. "Men like Doolin don't let things go easy." Clara's pulse quickened. The world behind her felt heavy, full of shadows. She stared east, where smoke still drifted faintly from the outlaw camp. The wind carried the smell of it even here. "He's dead," she said. "You killed him." "Yeah," Ethan answered quietly. "But he's got men who ain't." By the time the sun dipped low, they found a dry riverbed curling through scrub and stone. The horse stopped on its own, sides heaving. Ethan slid off, biting down a groan as his wounded arm brushed the saddle horn. Clara climbed down after him, her feet touching the cool sand. She swayed a little, dizzy from hours in the saddle. "Sit," he told her. "We'll rest here." She obeyed, watching as he knelt to clean his arm with water from the canteen. He poured some over the wound, teeth gritted against the sting. The muscles in his jaw worked hard. Clara wanted to help, but hesitated. She still didn't know where the line was between gratitude and trust. Finally, she said, "You saved my life. That don't make me yours." He looked at her, eyes steady beneath the brim of his hat. Never said it did. That answer surprised her. He tore a strip from his shirt with his teeth, bound the arm tight, and leaned back against a rock. "Get some sleep? We ride at first light." Clara stared at him a long time. "You don't even ask my story?" He sighed. "I've seen enough stories out here. Most end the same." "Maybe mine don't," she said softly. He didn't reply. The wind whispered through the dry grass, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote cried, a lonely sound that carried across the night. They made camp beneath a stand of dead cottonwoods. Ethan built a small fire, barely more than a flicker, careful to hide its glow behind a fallen log. The night pressed close, dark and wide, full of sound. Frogs croaked near a distant pool. Insects buzzed in the brush. Clara huddled close to the warmth, watching the firelight dance on Ethan's face. For the first time, she saw more than his gun hand and his guarded eyes. He looked tired, older than his years, the kind of tired that came from carrying ghosts. She wanted to ask what haunted him, but before she could, he spoke. "Where were you headed before they took you?" She hesitated. "Nowhere that matters. My father owed Doolin. Couldn't pay. He died trying to. They came for the debt anyway." Ethan nodded slowly. "That's their way. Take what they want till nothing's left." She looked at him across the fire. "And you? What kind of man rides into a camp full of killers for a stranger?" His eyes flicked up, catching the flames. "The kind that's done too much wrong not to try something right." Silence again, heavy but not cruel. The fire popped. The smell of smoke and dry sage filled the air. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. "I thought I'd never be free again. When you cut that chain," she trailed off. I didn't believe it was real. Freedom's always real, he said. Just costs more than folks can pay. Before she could answer, the horse lifted its head. Ears pricked. Ethan stiffened. Someone's out there. He put out the fire with one quick motion, scattering dirt. Moonlight washed the riverbed in pale silver. Clara could hear it now, too. Faint hoofbeats. "Get down," he whispered. They crouched behind a boulder, hearts pounding. The sound grew louder. 3, maybe 4 riders moving slow, careful. A voice drifted across the dark. "Tracks head this way." Could be them. Ethan drew his revolver, cocked it with a soft click. His breath came slow, steady. He waited until the shadows came close enough to see the glint of metal in their hands. Then he fired. The shot cracked through the night, echoing off the canyon walls. One rider fell with a grunt. The others wheeled their horses, shouting. Gunfire answered, bullets sparking off the rocks. Clara ducked, covering her head. Ethan fired again, then hissed as pain shot through his wounded arm. "Stay low." "I can help," she cried. "Don't be stupid." But she was already moving, crawling through the dust. She found his dropped rifle and gripped it tight. Her hands trembled, but she remembered the weight of fear worse than death. She aimed at a flicker of movement, a man creeping between rocks, and squeezed the trigger. The recoil jolted her shoulder. The man fell hard, rifle clattering away. The noise stopped as suddenly as it began. Smoke drifted in the moonlight. Ethan turned to her, chest heaving. "You..." She lowered the gun, shaking. "He was going to kill you." He stared for a long moment, then gave a single nod. "You did what you had to." Clara looked down at her hands. They shook uncontrollably, grime mixing with tears she didn't realize had fallen. "I killed a man," she whispered. Ethan holstered his gun. "You survived one. That's different." He took the rifle gently from her hands and set it aside. "Try to sleep if you can. We'll move before dawn." She didn't sleep. She sat awake, watching the stars fade slowly, thinking of the life she'd lost and the one she hadn't yet begun to live. By morning, the sky turned pale yellow, the kind of color that promises heat before noon. They left the camp in silence, riding north along the dry river. The air smelled of iron and dust. Clara's mind replayed the night's violence again and again, until the sound of the gunfire seemed stitched into her heartbeat. Ethan rode ahead, posture rigid, eyes scanning the horizon. His arm hung stiff, blood dark on his sleeve. She wanted to tell him to stop, to rest, but she knew he wouldn't. Men like him didn't rest, they endured. When they finally stopped, it was by a crumbling stone building half buried in weeds. The old church leaned against time, roof caved and bell fallen beside the doorway. Ethan dismounted with a grunt. "We'll stay here till night." Inside, dust floated in the sunlight, cutting through the holes in the roof. A wooden cross still hung above the altar, crooked but standing. Clara ran her fingers along the pew, leaving streaks in the grime. "Feels like the dead still listen here," she said. "Then maybe they'll listen to me," Ethan muttered, lowering himself to the floor. He unwrapped his arm, revealing the angry wound beneath. Clara knelt beside him. "Let me?" He hesitated, then nodded. She cleaned the wound as best she could, using water from the canteen and a torn sleeve. He winced, but didn't pull away. "You're lucky," she said. "Bullet just grazed you." "Luck's something I don't trust much," he said, half smiling. When she finished, she sat beside him. Light streamed across the dusty floor, illuminating the quiet ruin around them. "Did you ever believe in God?" she asked. He was silent for a long while. "Once. Before I learned he don't ride these roads." She looked toward the doorway, where the wind stirred dust into tiny storms. "Maybe he does. Maybe we just forget to look." Ethan gave her a strange look, part disbelief, part respect. "You got more faith than sense." "Maybe that's what's kept me alive," she said. He chuckled softly. It was the first sound of something close to warmth she'd heard from him. Maybe so. As the day burned on, the church grew hotter. They took turns resting. When Clara woke from a brief sleep, she found Ethan sitting at the doorway, watching the horizon again. His eyes were distant. "What do you see?" she asked. He didn't turn. Ghosts. All the ones I didn't save. She walked over, stood beside him. You can't carry all that forever. He finally looked at her. And you? You think you can outrun what happened to you? I don't aim to outrun it, she said. I aim to outlive it. The words hung there between them. Simple, fierce, true. He nodded slowly. You're tougher than you look, Clara Hale. And you're kinder than you think, Ethan Cole. Before he could answer, a faint sound carried on the wind. Hoofbeats. Not many, but close. They froze. Ethan stood, hand on his gun. They found us. Clara's blood went cold. What do we do? Same thing we've been doing, he said grimly. We survive. They moved fast, grabbing their gear, tightening the saddles. Clara glanced back once at the broken cross, sunlight gleaming on its edges. Guess prayers don't travel fast enough, she whispered. Ethan looked at her, jaw set. Maybe they do. We just gotta ride before the answer catches us. They mounted up and pushed the horses into motion, dust kicking up behind them. The sound of riders echoed faintly from the south, still far but closing. As they crested the next ridge, the wind shifted, carrying the smell of rain. Clara turned her face into it, feeling the cool drops hit her skin. For the first time, she didn't feel afraid. Behind them, thunder rolled across the plains. Ahead, the land opened wide toward the north. Neither spoke, but both knew it. The fight wasn't over. It had only changed shape. They rode on into the gathering storm, the old church fading into the distance, its bells silent, but the memory of its quiet strength riding with them. And when lightning split the sky far ahead, Clara thought it looked like a chain breaking clean in two. The fire was dying low when Evelyn stirred, her eyes catching the faint red glow across the cold embers. Dawn hadn't come yet, but the horizon had begun to pale, the kind of colorless light that made the world feel like it held its breath. She sat up slowly, her side aching from the wound she'd taken near the creek 2 days before. The fever had nearly claimed her that night, and only James's steady hands and grim determination had kept her alive. He sat now at the mouth of the cave, rifle resting across his knees, his silhouette carved in pale ash gray against the fading stars. His hat brim shadowed his face, but she could see the stillness of him, alert, waiting. You didn't sleep, she said softly. He didn't turn. Didn't need to. Her lips curved in a faint, tired smile. You always say that. James finally glanced back. The dim light caught the hard line of his jaw, the deep exhaustion beneath his eyes. You'd rather I slept while they're hunting us? I'd rather you still had some part of you that believed this could end, she whispered. He looked at her for a long time before replying. It ends when they're dead, or we are. The echo of his words filled the cave like smoke. Evelyn pressed her palms to her knees, trying to steady her breath. She'd once thought she understood men like him, men driven by loss, by vengeance. But the depth of his silence these past few days had frightened her more than any outlaw's rifle. Outside, a coyote howled. James's fingers brushed the trigger guard. They're close, he murmured. Evelyn stiffened. How close? He motioned her down with a quick gesture, close enough to smell the fire. In one swift movement, he doused the remaining coals with sand. The cave fell into darkness, broken only by the faintest thread of dawn light at the entrance. Evelyn's heartbeat thundered in her ears. She could hear faint voices now, men moving through the brush, the metallic clink of a spur. James's voice was barely a breath. There's a ridge out back. You crawl through the gap and follow the rocks west. Don't stop till you see the cottonwoods. Her hand shot out, catching his sleeve. And you? I'll make sure they don't follow. No, she hissed, gripping tighter. You said we'd leave together. He pulled free. That was before I heard 5 rifles. Before she could speak again, he leaned in, his voice low and raw. You want to live? Eve, you run. Don't look back. Then he was gone, sliding through the mouth of the cave like a shadow. Evelyn pressed a trembling hand to her lips, biting back the cry that rose in her throat. For one terrible moment, she froze. Then instinct took over. She dropped to her knees and crawled to the narrow gap at the back of the cave. Cold rocks scraped her palms and tore her skirt. When she emerged on the far side, the early light hit her face like a slap. Gunfire cracked. Once, twice, then a volley. Her heart lurched. She stumbled to her feet, half running, half falling through the rocks. The world spun with sound, echoing shots, shouts, and then silence. She didn't stop. Couldn't. By the time she reached the cottonwoods, her lungs were burning. She collapsed against a trunk, clutching the rough bark. The silence that followed was worse than the gunfire. Then, hooves. She turned. A rider appeared through the mist. James, alive. He slid off the horse, breath ragged, coat torn. His shoulder was bleeding, but his eyes, those cold, steady eyes, were still clear. "You didn't listen," he said, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I never do," she shot back, tears streaking her dirt-stained cheeks. He looked at her for a long time, then simply said, "Good." Behind him, the horizon was flaming with sunrise now, the light spilling across the barren plain. For the first time in weeks, Evelyn felt something like hope, but that hope was short-lived. James swayed slightly on his feet. The blood soaking through his shirt was spreading fast. "Sit," she ordered, grabbing his arm. "Let me see." He resisted. "No time." She glared at him. "You'll die if you don't let me help." He met her eyes, then slowly sank to his knees. "They'll keep coming, Eve. I killed 3, maybe 4. The rest won't stop till they find a girl who humiliated their boss." Her jaw tightened. "Let them come." James gave a low, humorless laugh. "That's what I said once." The sound of that laugh broke something inside her. She tore a strip from her torn underskirt and pressed it hard to his wound. He hissed in pain. "You're not dying here," she said fiercely. "Not after everything." He looked up at her. "You think this ends with me?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. For a long moment, there was only the sound of wind through the trees. They rode west through the morning, the plain stretching endless before them. The sky was pale and hard, the kind that offered no shade, no promise. James rode ahead, jaw tight, one hand pressed aside. Evelyn followed on the mule, her mind a storm. She had been a prisoner once, a man's property, his leverage. She had vowed she'd rather die than belong to another, and now she was fighting beside one. They stopped at a dry creek bed near noon. James dismounted with effort. He crouched by the sand, studying the faint impressions of hooves. "They split up," he murmured. "2 headed north. One's tracking us west." "Can we lose them?" she asked. He didn't look up. "Maybe." Evelyn slid off her mule. "Then we'll try." He almost smiled. "You sound like me now." She met his eyes. "Maybe you sound like me." Something unspoken hung between them. Fear, defiance, maybe something more. Then he turned away, his voice low. "If we make it past the ridge by sundown, we can reach Fort Wallace. They won't dare follow us that close to the soldiers. And if we don't, then we make our last stand where we fall." The words settled between them like the dust. They rode hard through the afternoon. The land changed, flat giving way to broken hills, dry gullies cutting deep into the earth. The wind picked up, carrying grit that burned their eyes. By dusk, they reached the ridge. From there, they could see the plain stretch endless and golden gray, the fort faint in the distance, just a speck on the horizon. James reined in his horse. "We camp here. We'll move at first light." Evelyn nodded, sliding off the mule. Her legs ached, but she said nothing. She built a small fire while he cleaned his rifle, every motion methodical, almost ritual. After a while, he said quietly, "You ever think about what you'll do when this is over?" She didn't answer right away. "Over?" "When they stop chasing. When you're free." Evelyn stared into the fire. "I wouldn't know what to do with freedom anymore." He nodded slowly, like he understood. "That's the thing about it. Once you lose it, you don't trust it when it comes back." Silence again. Then he said, almost to himself, "Maybe I kept fighting so I didn't have to feel how much I'd lost." She looked at him, really looked. The lines on his face weren't just from sun and grit. They were from guilt, regret. "You saved me," she said softly. "Don't turn that into something ugly." His eyes lifted to hers, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something raw, vulnerability. Then came the sound that froze them both. Hooves. From below the ridge. James's rifle was in his hands before she could blink. Get down. Evelyn dropped behind the rocks. She peered out and saw them, 3 riders moving slow, cautious, rifles slung across their saddles. James took a breath. When I fire, you head east. There's a ravine about 100 yards down. Follow it till it narrows. I'm not leaving you again. He turned, eyes blazing. You will if you want to live. Before she could argue, he fired. The first shot dropped one of the riders. The others scattered, shouting. Bullets tore through the brush, rock chips flying. Evelyn crawled for cover, heart pounding. James fired again once, twice. Then silence. When she looked back, he was gone. James! She cried, scrambling over the rocks. She found him crouched behind a boulder, reloading with shaking hands. Blood soaked his sleeve again. They'll flank us, he muttered. Can't stay here. She grabbed his arm, helping him up. Then let's move. Together, they stumbled toward the ravine. The sound of horses thundered behind them. Bullets whined overhead. Evelyn fired blindly once with a spare revolver, just to keep them back. They reached the ravine just as the last light bled from the sky. James stumbled, knees buckling. She caught him before he fell. Keep going, he gasped. You're almost there. I'm not leaving you, she said fiercely. Not again. He met her eyes, and in them she saw everything, the pain, the fight, the promise. Then we die together, he whispered.